Sport is an important part of Australia that dates back to the early colonial period. Sport has shaped the Australian national identity through events such as the Ashes, the Melbourne and the America's Cup. For leisure time, Australian people take advantage of the great climate by spending a lot of time outside, such as having barbecues with friends, bushwalking, camping, or going to the beach. They also like to shop, dine out, and go to the cinemas in their leisure time. So, what is the detail of Australian sport and leisure?
Australian rules football began its evolution in Melbourne, Australia about 1858. The origin of Australian football before 1858 are still a subject of much debate, as there were a multitude of football games in Britain, Europe, Ireland, and Australia which also influenced the early football games played in Melbourne. Teams would have to agree before each match which rule be followed and different aspects of association football, Gaelic football, rugby football, Sheffield rules, Cambridge rules, Winchester College football, Uppingham and Narrow football were apparent in the early games. In April, a new headmaster from Great Britain was hoping to introduce manly games to their students. Dr. John Edward Brumby, educated at Cambridge and headmaster of Melbourne Church of England Grammar School, joined forces with William Northcote of St Kilda Grammar School. Together, they agreed the school should play a match of football at the beginning of the winter. This is the earliest football games on record between Victorian School of Clubs. It took place on 5 June in St Kilda, and St Kilda Grammar won the match. The earliest official formal league were the South Australian National Football League, at the time called the South Australian Football Association, and the Victorian Football Association. The first intercolonial matches were played shortly after in 1879. The game was first known on Melbourne rules football. Then, as the game spread throughout the country, it became as Victorian rules football, and then Australian rules football. The game was set in the early years through feedback from club, players and spectators. The rules changed from this feedback was others from at least 1860 in the annual meeting of secretaries usually held in May. By federation, in 1901, the game was the main winter sport in Victoria, South Australia, Western Australia and Tasmania, with the Victorian Football League, South Australia National Football League, and the West Australia Football League operating as separate competitions. The game was played in New South Wales and Queensland but was second in popularity to rugby union, the main winter sport. The VFL became the Australian Football League, a nation body, and the Premier League in Australia, and later became the de facto governing body for the sport. Australian Football League. The Australian Football League, or AFL, is the preeminent and only fully professional men's competition of Australia football. To the AFL Commission, the AFL also serves the sport governing body and is responsible for controlling the laws of the game. Originally known as the Victorian Football League, it was founded in 1896 as the breakaway competition from the Victorian Football Association, with its inaugural season commencing in the following year. The VFL, aiming to become a national competition, began expanding beyond Victoria to other Australian states in 1980s and changed its name to AFL in.
Famous clubs and players. Famous players like Matthews. Clubs Hawthorn, position midfield or forward. Games played 332, goals 915. So supremely skilled and talented, what made Matthews great was the fear He instilled in position players a brutal player. Matthews would win the football or destroy the man who grabbed it. The best small forward or midfielder of all time, and arguably the game's greatest player. The second one, Ted Wheaton. Clubs, Footscray, Western Bulldogs. Position centre half forward or central halfback. Games played 321. Goals 360. The nickname says it all. Mr. Football was a larger-than-life icon of the game who was one of the great key position players. He was officially either a centre half forward or centre halfback, but it didn't really matter where he lined up. Wheaton could play anywhere and was really beaten. The last one, Gary Abel Sr. Clubs Hawthorn, Geelong. Position wing or full forward. Games played 248. Goals 1030. Known simply as God among football folk, Gary Abel Sr. was the one man who made human highlight reel. Like Matthews, Abel was as tough or uncompromising as he was skilled. Famous clubs. The Richmond Football Club, nicknamed the Tiger, is a professional Australian rules football club playing in the Australian Football League, or AFL, the sport's premier competition. The second one, the Collingwood Football Club, nicknamed the Magpies, or colloquially the Bees, is a professional Australian rules football club playing in the Australian Football League, or AFL. The last one, the West Coast Eagles, was founded in the 1986 as an expansion team. It entered the AFL, then known as the Victorian Football League, in the 1987, along with Queensland's Brisbane Bears. It reached the final series for the first time in the 1988 and won its first premiership in the 1992, having been defeated in the grand final the previous year.
So let's start with the meaning of leisure. What is leisure? Leisure is what people do for spending their free time. So what Australians do for spending their free time? They like to go traveling to the place like Melbourne, Sydney or Perth, or to plan longer trips to explore more of Australia. And they also like outdoor activities such as surfing, kitesurfing, swimming, diving, snorkeling, sailing, and much more. And they also don't forget their culture. They like to go to museum, theater performance, and go to festival. Let's move to what leisure trends in Australia. First one, entertainment. Australians value their leisure time and take advantage of their climate by spending a lot of time outside, having barbecues with friends, bushwalkings, camping, or going to the beach. They also like to shop, dine out, and go to cinemas in their leisure time. Sport is a big passion for many Australians, especially homegrown Australian rules football, cricket, rugby, and tennis.
From the explanation before, we can see that Australia have so many interesting sport and leisure, like their national sport competition, Australian Football League, which has changed its name several times until officially in 1990 named as AFL, Australian Football League. And in Australia, there are so many famous players and clubs that we already talking about before. For the leisure, there are so many interesting leisure in Australia. Like for the traveler, we can go to popular cities like Melbourne, Sydney, or Perth, or to plan longer trips to explore more of Australia. And there are must-see spots, and popular tourist places include Uluru in the Northern Territory, the Great Ocean Road in Victoria, the Whitsundays,
and the Great Barrier Reef off the coast of Queensland, and the Daintree Rainforest, Margaret River in Western Australia, and Kangaroo Island of South Australia. Wow, they're so interesting. And the outdoor activities is also amazing in Australia. And we can also go shopping and find some unique food in Australia. And of course, there are festivals there, like cultural festival and of course music concert. It is so interesting to see more about Australia. All of these interesting sport and leisure are used for attract tourists to come to Australia. So that's all. Thank you for watching.